Hello, everyone. My name is Bahanur Nasia from Wonderland, and I'm very happy to have a new webinar for fair mobility with Lina Mosshammer. Lina, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be here today. So my name is Lina. I'm co-founder of Point End. We are an organization working on inclusive mobility. So it's all about how to create inclusive mobility services and infrastructures. So as for people, so that all the different target groups, being it elderly, being it families, being it children, have a really comfortable and enjoyable trip every day. We see that in mobility, it's not yet there. So when you look at mobility, we are still thinking about very simple A to B trips. We're still thinking about very like people who have 9 to 5 jobs, have the money to be able to go from A to B, and we have to go beyond that, and that's where we come in.
What is your personal connection to mobility and inclusiveness?
Mhm. So I have studied regional planning and city planning, and there is a big part of it is mobility, just because all of our surroundings include mobility, being it streets, being it pavements, being it just how to design cities. So it's all about mobility, and I have to say I already kind of decided to get into mobility in my first week of the at university. We had a lecturer from AIT who was focusing on behavioral change and behavior, mobility behavior. I started working with her a few weeks after, and since then I'm in mobility.
Wonderful. That's very, very strong focus from the beginning of your studies. Um, We in Fair Mobility are also looking on the countryside, on the rural mobility, and our focus is also to look into the gender aspect. Do you have any relation or experience which would connect those topics?
Yes, so I mean, in the beginning, it was more a personal experience. So being at conferences, maybe being the only woman at a conference, just feeling it and also having to kind of convince people that you are actually professional. It was quite hard in the beginning. If you're in a group of people, maybe you're the only woman, and then you have to show your competences. So this is the personal experience, and then of course also seeing the solutions, and then sometimes questioning if solutions are really, if it's really a good solution, if it's not missing some kind of perspective, and in that case, the female perspective for mobility. And it actually the point where I thought, hey, we can really do something was when I was at a conference in Germany. Um, and it was a event from Women in Mobility in Germany. That's a network for women in the sector, focusing on making women visible, but also connecting and also just promoting the sector of mobility altogether. And I was there and thought, hey, that's something we could use in Austria. Austria is still male dominated. There could be a better mix. Um, and I found two more women who were actually also having the same thought. And we started Women in Mobility in Austria. And with that, I kind of got deeper into the topic. And since then, I've worked also in my two former employments at the World Bank on gender and mobility. I've worked also at 𝐬𝐲𝐬 in Austria on gender and mobility and getting more and more into that topic and also doing research on it.
Wonderful. I have similar experience, and I grew up in countryside. I mean, coming from the planning perspective, as an architect, I heard very often from planners, no matter if they are regional, urban planners, but also mobility planners, mobility companies, providers. We plan for everyone. That was we don't need
Mm,
to focus because we do it for everyone. What would be for you the incidences where we can see that we don't
yeah.
actually do that?
So that's something we often get, and even when we do workshops and you're like, hey, you have a solution or you have an idea, please define for whom are you planning. And they are saying, I'm planning for everyone. I've heard that many, many times. And the thing is, yes, we want to plan for everyone and we think we do, but that when you really look at the different target groups and it's making it easier to split them, even though, of course, there are a lot of overlaps between the different groups you can define. A lot of people also work with personas, so to design a person and then think like what's the need of this person and then think about that. Sometimes that helps. But when you go into the depth and, for example, you have a product or you have an idea and you specifically focus, for example, on families, you find out there is a lot missing. So it helps you to get in that perspective. I mean, best case, you're inviting people who actually can bring in that perspective. But even if you just for yourself look at your solution and then take one perspective after the other, you will already, if you go through the whole journey, you will already get to some solutions and some ideas which would make it much more easy. One example for is car sharing. So if you look at car sharing and you think, hey, car sharing is for everybody, and then you look at the data, and especially in Germany, there is data available, and I know there are a few car sharing providers who are much better, but in Germany, it's a 20% share of female users in car sharing. And you could ask, like, why is that? I mean, it's for everyone. And there could be many aspects that influence this. But for example, in Austria, there is one service which offers children seats in the car. So you can optionally opt in children seats into the car sharing car. And now they have a lot more, not just women, but families using their service. And they are actually at 50-50, not just because of that measure. Of course, there are like info days where you can experience how it is taking the first step to first use a car sharing car. So there are a lot of more other measures as well. But sometimes it can be as simple as a child seat in the back to be able to reach new target groups and make it even possible to use the service.
Because you mentioned the participation of certain groups like women, families, or women or family representatives in workshops and co-design, co-creation moments, I wonder how to organize that because especially if you look at the rural, we have a high percentage of housewives or caregivers who then have the issue that they have to juggle a lot of activities like bringing the kids to school, bringing the elderly to doctors or facilities, and do the household and all those things, which leaves very little room. And you have
Mhm.
then also distances and so on. Do you have any good experience how to organize this representation?
Yeah, so we do it. I mean, maybe I tell you two things. So the one thing is if you're having any kind of event, any kind of testing or like a World Cafe or whatever, think about who do you want to reach and then think about what's the best time to invite them. So maybe think about the timing of the workshop. Think about the incentives maybe. So what could I give them that is interesting for the specific target group? Is it money? Is it food? Is it maybe even somebody who takes care of the child during the workshop? So these are options you can do to make people participate in your workshops and in your citizen engagement formats. Um, a lot more, but this is just bits and pieces what you can think about. And the other thing we do, we call it experience journey, is to organize. For example, we do that every year. We organize an event with different target groups. So we do have a workshop format of a few, like let's say 2 hours. And then there are people from the different target groups. So we have a person, for example, representing invisible disabilities. We have a person representing visual impairment. We have a person representing families, elderly, and so on. So depending on also the needs of the people participating. And those people we invite, of course, they have one perspective. I mean, every family is different, every person is different. But what we do, they are either already experts in the field and working a lot in that field, or we teach them, or we are coaching them before having this session. and they are very much trained in how to talk about their own mobility and how to express their needs. And then it's a very open exchange. So the workshop format is there are a lot of stations with different kind of target groups. The people participating go from station to station and have a very in-depth talk with the person on their mobility and just listen. First, they just listen. The person is talking about the personal mobility, really opening up, and then it's a Q&A, so it's questions and answers. And you can ask whatever question. It can be a dumb question. You can ask whatever. And with that, it's already the first step of understanding different perspectives and bringing them in. And every time after those workshops, the participants say, "Hey, I haven't thought about this. That was new for me," or "This is something I can consider in further developing my idea." And maybe even a target group which you haven't thought about yet. Because very often we have this narrow view, okay, that's I have a solution for this kind, like for everyone or for like a specific target group, but it would be a very good idea for many people.
I have been recently talking to a solution developer which more or less developed a small car which is kind of like has four wheels but has is the size of a motorcycle or something like that. And the, the and they think it's an inclusive mobility offer. And since you work with a lot of solution provider or service provider, I wonder what your take is. What is kind of like really out there as a service or vehicle, perhaps also solution, or even a public mobility program or offer, which kind of like reach these inclusive targets.
Mm. So we have a program accompanying companies, especially startups, on how to develop inclusive mobility services. And what I've seen is when you look at solution, being it ideas from bigger companies, but also those startups, there are really good ideas, and then there are some ideas which seem maybe good at the beginning, but they may not really solve the problem. So that what we are doing is very much from the beginning on focus on testing, focusing on getting them together with target groups, but also with their future customers. Maybe could also be a city. So it's really interesting that a lot of solutions are already planning ahead and already have an idea, and they have never spoken with cities, even though it's a solution that should be implemented in cities. So it's really important from the beginning on, and that's what we are doing to to challenge the idea, but also in the development already include just different perspectives to make sure that it's actually a good solution. I'm not sure I've heard about a lot of solutions that with these four wheels and the kind of small cars, and it's a nice idea, but it can be implemented in such different ways. It can be completely something which we don't need, and it could be something that's actually helping people to move around. So it very much depends from the beginning on to already consider the different needs, and this is something that a lot of companies don't do yet.
Yeah, I mean, for this one solution, there would be 1 to 2 seats, which is kind of like, especially people take having the caregiving tasks, it doesn't fit because no matter if even if you are a male who's bringing the
Mm-hmm.
kids to the school, it's not working out. But predominantly, it's a woman who bring the elderly or the kids to school and doctors and so on. It wouldn't work. You wouldn't have space for baby carriage and so on. I would like to know how you see the landscape of mobility offers in urban areas in Austria and in peri-urban or rural. Where do you see the biggest gaps? Why are we stuck in rural with cars?
Um, what we do, we very much focus on cities. That's something we can see that if you, I mean, it's understandable if you want to implement something, you maybe first need the big crowd to use it to be able to spread it also into smaller areas. But what we especially have in Austria is that we are talking about big cities and then the rural area, and kind of the in-between is missing.
Yeah, we have
So
2
it's
million Vienna, and then we have like the biggest village is 10,000
yeah.
in Vorarlberg, and there is not much. I mean, you have a few cities with a few hundred, but
But
there is
also
not.
thinking about those cities which have 10 to 30,000 inhabitants, to also think about the smaller ones would be really nice. And also the other thing is, maybe I can draw the line also to one of our studies, which was looking at the mobility companies. So what do they actually do? What do they actually know about their customers? And being at cities, being at rural, but we saw that, and we did a survey with 100 mobility companies in the German-speaking area, and they don't really know their customers. So how can you do anything for your customers if you don't know how they use it and who is actually using your service? And that was something, uh, yeah, also eye-opening. So it's not just the feeling that they don't really design mobility for the actual needs, but it's actually in the data. It's 17% of the companies collecting more detailed data on their users.
Mhm,
And 17, that's very, very low number. And even those companies, we talked with a few of them, um, they do extra service. They do some kind of workshops to get a bit of an information, but in as a whole, they don't know who is using their service and who is not. And if you don't have that information, you can't really improve your service. You can't, you don't know what you're working for.
Um, I can confirm that's also my feeling or my feedback from the field. But I wonder if there are already companies like the 17% you mentioned, what specifically do they do differently? Like
Mhm.
in how does the data translate in offers or work or
Mhm.
research?
So the ones we spoke with, you can see it, and you there are also, as an example, there is one scooter company. They do extra service, so they don't use the actual, like the everyday data. It's just because of GDPR, so the data regulations, that you're not allowed to use personal data. And they are very much afraid, and it's a lot of companies that are afraid that if they use data, it's too personal, so you can know who is actually the person moving. And this is something you're not allowed to do in the European Union. But of course, you can do anonymize, or you can also ask the people, hey, are you okay with us using your data? Because we want to improve our service. So they, as most of the other companies, did extra service, asking, in one case, for example, especially women, what is needed. And they found out that the scooters they're using, they have quite big handles. And if you're a woman, or if you're even just a smaller person, your hands, it's feeling uncomfortable and it's feeling unsafe. And based on that questionnaire, they changed the size of the handles just to make it them like feel more safe.
Mhm,
So that's one of the many examples what's maybe not the biggest change, but what you can do to reach target group better.
mhm. Thank you. Um, and is there any good examples, no matter if it's Austria or Europe, where mobility is tackled as a inclusive project and perhaps because
Mhm.
that's important for us for made better for women or gender minorities?
Mm, so there are a lot of projects. I would say a lot of them are also kind of maybe publicly funded research projects and so on. Maybe two ideas or two projects I like. So one of them is, for example, in Vienna. They did in Favoriten, so in the southern part of Vienna, they had a park which was not really used by girls, and they actually did include the girls into the redesign of the park to make it specifically also catering to their needs. And this
Mhm.
is something in park design, in public space design, you can see that girls and boys are using it very differently. and there are just different needs. And now the park is redesigned, and you can really see that the girls are also using it, and that they're more and more included also in the public design, which is also really nice to work together with the citizens. And in Vienna, they also do, I would say you could improve it, but at least they have a strategy of gender mainstreaming to always, if you develop something new, also have this gender perspective in mind and see, hey, do we equally contribute with that to the different target groups, to the different people living in the city? So that's something I think is really nice. It could be implemented even more and improved, of course. But there are a lot of projects related to this. And maybe a different project in Germany, which is also really nice. It's more focused on children and elderly in 𝐸𝐲𝐬𝐿. There was a project working together with those target groups and also allowing them to be part of the development process of mobility. As an example, with elderly, they actually asked them, like, what are your paths and what do you need? And one of the outcomes was that they put more seating possibilities in the city, and they put the seating like the seats exactly at the paths where the elderly said, hey, that's a place where I might have to sit down when I walk to the bus. Maybe it's even too far. I need to have some place to sit, otherwise I'm not capable to do this on my own. So by improving and even just putting a bench there, and they did really nice different designs of benches, some more elaborate, some were just a stick where you can lean on. But with that, it's making it easier, and it might be even possible for people to walk because they have a bench, they have something to sit down in between.
One focus for us is also to improve the public transportation, and I will share with you my experience. I mean, it's not about the specific city, but I was a few years ago in a major city in Italy, and the whole train station was kind of like locked off. So you had to show your tickets and ran through the
Mhm.
control like in the airport. And when you pass that point, because you mentioned it, the infrastructure, when you passed that point, there was no seating, no toilet, nothing. Like if you have to uh, get with hundreds of people on a train. So you have to go there on time. So you have to be there early, but there is no facility. And
Mhm.
especially me being there with two kids, it was really, really challenging to plan that. And I wonder if there are specific gaps or already solutions in your experience how to improve this public
Mhm.
transportation issue because it's not that competitive with having private cars.
Yeah. So that's maybe something, it's not just, I'd say a lot of people would say it's about the money. We don't have the money, but there, as you said, it can be as easy as places to sit. So it shouldn't be our excuse not to do it. What I think is really important also for public transport to just take a look at the whole user journey. So I feel like if you're planning public transport, the entities are, for example, there is the company designing and also producing the trains. There is maybe somebody responsible for the train station. Then there is somebody responsible for sharing mobility. So there's many different responsibilities, and mostly in public transport, different entities responsible for it. And what is really important when you think about the user is going through the whole user journey. So, for example, if, as you said, you're traveling with two kids, imagining this throughout the journey and then actually experiencing it. And if you would walk through, even if you don't have your two kids with you, but just if you do the whole journey from booking on maybe on your phone to being at the train station, and just imagine what would you do right now if you had two children and walking through that. And I think having children with you is a really good example because it solves a lot of problems also for others if you find solutions for that use case, and then go step by step. And so often I talk with people and they were like, yeah, but you can just stand or lean or hey, they haven't even thought about the possibility that something that simple could solve a lot of issues for a lot of people. It can be toilets, it can be seating places, it can be water dispensers, it can be even greenery to make it feel more comfortable, it can be lighting to feel safe. So there are a lot of things that are not considered in many cases. Also, a really nice example. I don't understand why we not yet have, as in Japan, in every toilet, these seats where you can put in the children while you're on the toilet.
Yeah, there are very good examples as well. Um, I wonder if there is a tendency in certain regions of Europe, like those countries or these regions or countries with, I don't know, social housing or this and that, with universities have more advanced this and that, so that we can get a little bit of feeling where to look for good or bad examples or
Mhm.
gaps.
So I would say it's very much like distributed. Of course, if you look at the northern countries, there is more accessibility, even though,
Mhm.
for example, the Vienna just won the most accessible city award. So maybe it's a benchmark. At the same time, I think there is room for improvement still. If you looked at that. And I think it's also sometimes a city which you haven't thought about yet. So it's also the smaller cities, it's maybe the eastern cities, which have maybe not all over inclusivity or accessibility, but using those different small use cases it would be really nice. I don't have the project yet, but it would be really nice, for example, just to collect those best practices in a more, like in a better overview, because we're always starting from the beginning and I've seen the best projects when there were exchanges. So, for example, the the city responsible, the political city responsible for transport, going on a trip to another city, learning about their solutions, and then you implement it. Usually from those trips and from these exchanges, the
Mhm.
best ideas are coming up and the best implementations. Being it the biking highways which are we build right now, could it or still hoping, I'm saying again, the child seats on the toilet. So these ideas just to copy them and not just start from the beginning.
In Fair Mobility, we are working in 𝐬𝐸𝐸𝐻𝐸 in the 𝐬𝐸𝐬𝐭𝐲 region, and the exchange with some decision makers there was kind of like it's so difficult as a single municipality, single city, perhaps also as a single mobility offering company or organization to swim against the stream because certain things are just the way they are. And there was the wish uh, to network, to identify, to join an agreement or kind of like a
Mhm.
manifesto. And so it could be like the municipalities with pedestrians first, or it could
Mm,
be 15-minute city.
yeah.
I don't know. Are there things where you feel like
Mm,
this networking, this agreement, like the
mm,
climate city contract,
yeah.
helps really to outline and support and strengthen
Mm,
the people, the actors?
mm. So on the one hand, I think it's good that there are more and more networks, being it the climate neutral city network, being it driving urban transition, Civitas, and so on, and also them expanding more to rural areas as well. Because if you do online formats, it's also more accessible for everyone. Even though it's nice to meet each other and it's very important. Also, this I've seen this in person. But maybe to first even get the idea, you don't have the time as a small municipality to go everywhere. Maybe you even have a person who is responsible for three different topics, and it's hard to keep on track what's happening. I think what's really nice is in Austria we have the Klima-Energie-Modellregionen
Mhm.
and Anpassungsregionen, so the kind of networks of municipalities, and there is a regional coordinator who is already paid by public money and who kind of has the time and has even the task of implementing projects. So I think that's already a nice thing which we could even further expand, because we do need also the people having the time to implement or to take a look. What is also important, what you said, is sometimes if you're a municipality or if you're a city, maybe you don't want to do the first move, or even it's hard to take the step, and maybe people don't are not willing to change, or are a bit like hesitant at first, because you have to, of course, first show, hey, that makes sense. That's something that's we do it for you. What I like is, as an example, the what 5 municipalities do in Vorarlberg, so in the western part of Austria. They kind of build a network. So those 5 municipalities, they very often take decisions together. And that makes it much easier if it's not just like you, but the others together. And on the one hand, it's easier to make the decisions or to dare to make a decision, because it's not just you, but it's many. And secondly, if you implement something, it's not just your municipality, it's at least 5. So thinking about, for example, walking paths or cycling infrastructure or any kind of service, of course, it has much more impact if you do it not just for one municipality, but for a region.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
I really like that idea of if it makes sense to work together, as every time you implement something in one part of the municipality, it might impact the other one as well. Because if I'm building let's say a shopping center, traffic will not be just in my municipality, it will also be in the other ones as well. So it's always nice to collaborate on this. And I think that's a really nice example
Mm-hmm.
how to do it. And maybe just a very short third one.
Okay.
Um, the city of Tulln, for example, it's a bit northern of Vienna. They redesigned a parking space,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't just ask citizens like, what do you want to do with the space? They first designed with experts like how could it look like. They did renderings, so you can also see the pictures, like how would it look like, and the people could decide. There were 3 pictures, so the 3 different scenarios. Being it only 20 parking spaces are now green space in the end, or the highest one, we redesigned 200 parking spaces. And instead of just doing it and maybe having the people against them, they asked them, hey, those are the 3 scenarios, which one do you want? And they actually voted for the highest one, so the one which is like a complete redesign of the space.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I like. So you're giving options and you let people participate, but you also have an expert maybe first thinking about what's even possible, what makes sense
Yeah.
in for that space.
Realistic
Yeah.
options and
Yeah,
scenarios.
what are realistic options without telling you something like, if you go first to the citizens, maybe there's a huge wish list and you have to tell them, hey, I can't have a tree there because there is like I don't know, construction or anything underneath the ground. I can't do it here. So it's much
Mhm.
easier to have a basis to build on.
Which brings me to the topic because you mentioned data, and data is so difficult because we have data of things which are already happening, and but the things which we want to know are not there. Like we don't have all the active mobility options
Mm,
yet, which are safe and available and enough and
mm,
and comfortable and so on. So it's, and if you ask people in a survey, for instance,
mm,
like written surveys without pictures, and people say I would be active mobile, or they say no, I will be not because I don't
mm,
have the option. I know the
mm,
city, you know. So it's kind of like so difficult, even though scientifically correct
mm,
to make a survey, it's so difficult um, to say only because of the survey results,
mm,
this is what people wish, or that this will be happening. Even if people want to be active,
mm,
it doesn't mean they can actually, because it also depends on the last mile from the public
Mm,
transportation to home. Is it on a hill, or can I get there by bike or with baby carriage, and in winter with
mhm,
snow and so on? So there are so many factors between what data surveys can capture,
mhm,
but we have to re-imagine, re-envision the cities, the living spaces, which are not. How to work with that, with things which
That
are not yet.
I, I don't have a solution to be honest. So I think we are all struggling with this. So on the one hand, mm, how much data can we collect? Like what's even possible, and if we collect data, how to do it? Um, what we do if we do surveys is really to go into depth also on the um, like when do we ask the survey, who do we ask the survey, what else could we consider? So for example, if you ask people in the summertime how often do you cycle, you will have a completely different outcome than if you ask in the wintertime how many times do you cycle. So at least thinking about the kind of the framework or what's influencing the answers is really nice. And then also maybe another example on a survey we did a survey on what kind of like also on travel patterns and on their movement, but also including care work to get a better insight on what's influencing their mobility, which is also really nice to know because if you know the person has a child or with one answer they quite a lot of people chose is I have a dog. So part of the reason for my how I travel is because I have a dog and I need to go for a walk with the dog, or the dog is not willing to go into public transport because it's afraid. So that's even a big influence. You might not think like at first that this could influence mobility is as much if you're not a dog owner yourself. So there are ways to get a bit rid of those biases of those when you do surveys, but I think it's really difficult to get rid of it completely, even especially when it comes to future. So if I ask you, hey, if we would change this, would you do this? And a lot of people would say yes, if, even though they might like when it's actually implemented, yeah, I would, but there is one crossroad which is still not safe, and that's why I still don't cycle. So it's very many factors influencing this. Um, I think what really helps when it comes to future scenarios is the renderings. So if you can afford it as a municipality to have some pictures so people can actually imagine how it could look like, makes it much easier. And then what we are testing in a new project is working with virtual and augmented reality
Mhm.
to like really experience how it could be.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Lina. I don't know if there are any things which you would like to add for our group, um, or if you have any actions in mind where you might need support or collaboration.
No, I'm really happy if somebody wants to get in contact, being it just exchanging further on the topic. And also, we will also work a lot more on, as you also said, on data collection, how to include people. We work a lot with communities on an expert level at the moment, and now we just won a project where we also will implement in 3 cities communities focusing on youth mobility, on youth. And I think the idea of building up communities for change and building up not just a network, but people who can be part of the change could really help to include different perspectives also for city planning, for mobility planning. It's a bit different than having these communities on an expert level. There are other things that are drawing them together, but I think it's a good instrument for the future to be able to implement change.
Mhm. We call them in our project interest groups because we feel like there are interest groups which have similar needs, but they are not yet a community. They don't know of the same interests.
Hmm.
I'd like to highlight, for instance, we have in the literature or in the project language vulnerable groups.
Mm,
Let's say people groups which have less income available, uh, but their perspective is almost never vulnerable because they see their achievements, they see how they manage with their low income, they see themselves as working in this and this field
mm,
and so on. They would never ever identify
mm.
themselves as vulnerable group, and they wouldn't come to a meeting when I say, "Hey, vulnerable group, come to
No,
us."
no.
So it's kind of like having these individual life stories which have similarities in some kind of
Mm,
needs. So some interests are similar, but they do not exchange on mobility at all at the moment, and therefore yeah, we call them interest group and try to develop kind of like community-like structure, even though it will most likely never be an association or so, but just be aware that there are those needs which could be communicated and better managed, and which would save them time, energy, maybe also financially, if they would do, for instance, car sharing or
and you can also be part of the change. I mean, it's very difficult to include citizens without really a good structure and a good form of information.
Mhm.
Because if you just ask people, people tend to say no. Because if you don't know what you're in for, it's difficult. But
Yeah,
it's a really a process that you have to accompany and think about how to build it up,
yeah,
and also how to inform people and how what is possible. Like how can I include them, and how do I reach, as you said, the different target groups that maybe not even know that they are one group for us
yeah,
at least.
yeah. Thank you very much, Lina,
Thank
for
you.
joining us. We will share your contacts with this webinar. So if you want to reach out to Lina, feel free. So thank you for coming, and see you in a next event.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye bye.